Good evening. I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show, and I welcome my colleague and co-host, and a very Merry Christmas to Larry Kudlow, CNBC and Kudlow Radio on the weekend. Good evening to you, Larry.
Good evening, John.
We didn't get 20,000, Larry, but we're right at the edge of it, as if we're savoring it like an extremely expensive Christmas present.
Well, it is, after all, just a number. I know it's a fancy number, and it's a benchmark number, but it is just a number. And I reckon we'll push through, but I don't know. Maybe it's going to take several whacks at that to get through it. A lot of signs out there of better economic growth. It ain't perfect by a long shot, but in the markets, it's real interest rates, not inflation, that's driving up long-term bonds. That's growth-oriented. Don't want to get too in the weeds, but corporate bonds, which are not risk-free, they're not government-backed, their spreads against treasuries are narrowing. That's a good sign. Commodity prices are a little bit higher. That's a good sign. The dollar is rising, I think, because of the growth issue, and most of the stocks rising are, cyclical growth-oriented stocks. And perhaps most importantly, there's a big sweep of consumer confidence. Really interesting. Michigan surveys, Gallup surveys, small business surveys. Since election, there's been a wave of confidence. And obviously that has to do with Donald Trump's election and presumably his agenda on tax cuts and health care reform and energy and so forth. So I think it's a much more optimistic country, John, whenever it passes 20,000.
I agree with you, Larry, but there's a note today to remind us just what the last 8 years have been like. The Obama administration has made a decision about how it will leave office. And this headline and first graph from the Wall Street Journal's Amy Harder. The Obama administration announced Tuesday that it would indefinitely block oil and natural gas drilling in vast swaths of the Arctic Ocean, smaller parts of the Atlantic Ocean, the latest in a string of last-minute actions in the face of President-elect Donald Trump's vows to undo President Barack Obama's environmental agenda. Larry, this is the administrative state going out the door, reminding us that we have not grown sizably for 8 years. I don't have all of it, but the president has to be part of it, Larry. He is not a man who encourages risk-taking and prosperity.
Basically, John, of course I think you're right. I think Mr. Obama has essentially waged a war on business, both large and small. Now, part of this war is against fossil fuels, as per today's dictum on offshore drilling, which can be easily reversed, and Trump will make it easy for Trump to look like a hero in the first hours of his presidency. But this war on business has been something, Obama has attacked business, criticized them, insulted them, made jokes at their expense. And I think that really takes a toll. And, of course, the worst sectors of the economy are business investment, which is the ultimate job and wage creator, or productivity, or profits. I mean, so you see, this is, we will bid him adieu, and he served 2 terms, and he is what he is. Historians will decide. But I can tell you this, Trump is for business, not against it. Trump believes in rewarding success, not punishing it, and therefore Trump is a new creature in the Washington scene. And I do think, at the risk of being proven wrong from a correction, which is inevitable, I do think the stock market is picking up this new idea of helping rather than harming American business.
We welcome our colleague Bill Whalen of the Hoover Institution. Bill, John Fund has told me that the Democrats are lining up who they're going to bork. I think that was what Mr. Fund said, to bork in the nomination hearings. And one name I'm hearing is Scott Pruitt, the Attorney General of Oklahoma, who is nominated to be the EPA, the Environmental Protection Administrator. And that would be consistent with this document from the White House today about blocking exploration in the offshore forever and in the Arctic. Bill, is that signs that the Democrats are getting organized because they're going with the Green Party to fight back, or is this more disorder? Good evening to you, Bill.
Hey, John. Hi, Larry. I think it's a sign that some Democrats want to have a fight on those terms, and I emphasize some Democrats because you don't have unison within the party right now. There are Democrats who want to wage war with Donald Trump on no uncertain terms, and that's Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and their faction of the party. There are other Democrats sitting out there and thinking that because this guy really is not ideologically rooted, he does have an agenda, but he is also prone to movement, as we've seen on climate change since he's been elected. Maybe they can play ball with him. And then there's yet another category of Democrats, and those who happen to hail from states that Donald Trump carried. And there are 10 of those senators sitting in the Senate next January who are going to be very careful as to how much of a fight they start with the president. So, sure, I can see some Democrats wanting to pitch a fight with him on the environment, but there are also going to be Democrats who are going to want to pick on finance because he picked somebody from Goldman Sachs. And there'll be other people who want to pick a fight with the State Department chair because he picked somebody from Big Oil. So it's sort of like Wheel of Fortune for the Democrats, and spin the dial and see what bugaboo it lands on, and that's where you'll have your fight.
Bill, is there any... I mean, you've got a couple of great pieces out that we'll discuss, but is there any moderate Democratic leaders left who could do business with Trump, reach across the aisle? JFK did this. Ronald Reagan did this. Other presidents have done this. Are there anybody who would take away the Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders cutting edge of sheer raw political opposition and rather instead play ball on issues and heaven forbid, civil discussion?
There are some Democrats, but I'm not sure they're so much willing to do it out of principle, Larry, as a political necessity. So I'd point you to Joe Manchin in West Virginia as a very good example of this, or Claire McCaskill in Missouri. And these are people who happened to get reelected in 2012, but 2018 is a very tough spot for them to be in. So they're not going to be so knee-jerk reflexive against Trump, and especially you're going to see with Manchin when it comes to the issue of energy, because one of the first things Mitch McConnell is going to do in the Senate is going to do some pro-coal business. So we'll see how much the Democrats want to fight on that and where Manchin is. But in all, Democrats have to be wary about fighting this guy, because why? It's not just about policy ideas, but it's also about values. It's about Washington. So again, because we can pick 2 or 3 names that the Democrats want to go after, maybe I've watched too many nature shows, but when you see what's going on out in the plains of the Serengeti, when the lions go after the herd, they go after the slowest member of the herd, the most vulnerable member. They don't go after 3 or 4 members of the herd at the same time. And Washington politics are very much the same way. But again, I think we could all sit down here. We could all come up with the name of who we think they're going to go after, and that's a reflection of the fact that they haven't decided who exactly is in their crosshairs.
So the names, we have Pruitt. I have it from Fun. Larry, do you have a name that they're going to go after?
Well, yeah, Pruitt of EPA. Some sources tell me they're going to go after Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary appointee, about the savings and loan that he and a group saved Indy Mac, and they've redone it into a new bank. I mean, I know Steve Mnuchin. I'm going to go to bat for him here. I know him. I worked with him. He's a smart guy. He's a detail guy. He's an honest guy, okay, and he's a numbers guy, and he's a pleasure to work with. This is so typical of this political poisonous atmosphere. So he and a group rescue a savings and loan, a rather big one. They rescue it, and then, yes, they have to operate on it, and they're going to have to take out some of the bad loans, which never should have been made in the first place, and yes, that disappoints people. But the bigger reality is, because the savings and loans survived, more people kept their jobs instead of getting wiped out, and more people kept their mortgages instead of all of them getting wiped out. So this is part of this Democratic poison, and I'm sure Mnuchin will come through this just fine.
Do you have another name, Bill, for us to look at? Last week, I thought it would be Rex Tillerson, but everything I've heard for the last week, Mr. Tillerson looks in very good shape, especially because the former secretaries of state spoke for him.
Yeah, I would have said last week that Tillerson would be the person to watch, but I think the combination of Robert Gates and Condoleezza Rice and James Baker going to bat for him pretty much cut off that discussion. No, I don't think we're going to see anybody unusual. If I were the Democrats, I might pick a second tier, and I might go after Trump's ambassadors, because why? Ambassadors are very important in this administration. If you don't trust the president, you don't trust his foreign policy apparatus. So maybe that's where you pick your fight. But again, the Democrats have to be selective in who they go after, and then secondly, they have to decide who's going to be the face of our party when we lead this fight. Is it going to be Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren? Is it going to be somebody a little more consoling like a Cory Booker? Somebody who's a little more general election friendly like that? These are very difficult decisions for Democrats and Republicans to make when you're out of power, because you have to decide who is going to be the face of our party. So I wish them luck on this front. It's not an easy thing to do.
Stay with that, Bill, for a moment. You wrote a good piece about the age problem.
Right.
And Republicans may have it too, but for the moment, let's look at the Democrats. Are there younger Democrats in the Senate, House, state houses who might emerge as quote-unquote reasonable, moderate, Bill Clinton-esque, JFK-esque, who don't fit the usual mode of, ultra-left cutting and slashing like Elizabeth Warren? Is there anybody out there like that?
Cory Booker would be the most interesting person to look at, because this is how Booker was molding himself. Remember, Larry, when he was the mayor of Newark and he was building himself up to run statewide in New Jersey. Now, he was a very prominent spokesperson for Hillary Clinton, a surrogate, and was very, very defensive of her. But the question for a guy like Booker getting forward is, you asked the right question. When Bill Clinton ran for office in 1992, he called himself a different kind of Democrat, and you've written a very good book about this with John Kennedy. If you look at Kennedy in terms of a lot of his social attitudes, his financial policies, he was not a liberal Democrat by any means, a guy who refused to join the American Democratic Association. So would a guy like Booker be willing to stand out there? But they need youthful representatives, because that is what revs the Democratic motor. And I'm convinced that this is one of the problems Hillary had in this election. Very odd existence for them to have a 69-year-old nominee. Republicans are very comfortable with that. Indeed, they want the guy who turned 70 in the election, the oldest elected president. But Democrats don't cater to that. And if you look in the House right now, the combined age of the three Democratic leaders in the House is 227 years, which is really pretty funny when you consider the Republicans only been around for 240.
Bill Whalen of the Hoover Institution, Larry Kudlow of CNBC and Kudlow Radio on the weekend. Also, Larry Kudlow mentioned in a Forbes piece as on the short list, the head of the short list, to head the Council of Economic Advisors for the Trump administration. So when we come back, I'd like Larry's thoughts about the Trump ambitions, the Trump transition, Trump administration ambition for the economy. We begin with this thou shalt not from the White House. What about the thou shalts? I'm John Batchelor.